Who decided what race you are? Who looked at your skin, your features, and placed you into a category, defining your place in the world before you even spoke a word? Race feels like it has always existed, like a natural law, but it wasn't. It was created, shaped, and weaponized. For most of human history, people saw differences, but they did not divide the world by race. That came later, built to justify power, empire, and control. The idea of race was invented, not discovered. It wasn't biology that made race real. It was men, drawing lines, writing laws, classifying human beings as superior or inferior based on nothing but appearance. Before the 15th century, civilization saw themselves as different from others, but their divisions were based on culture, language, and geography, not skin color. The Greeks thought the world was divided between Greeks and barbarians, people who spoke their language and those who didn't. The Romans built an empire of every shade, where your status mattered more than your complexion. In medieval Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, trade routes connected diverse peoples, and though there was hierarchy, it was not racial. But then, something changed. European expansion, the transatlantic slave trade, and colonization created a need for a new kind of justification, one that could explain why entire nations could be conquered, enslaved, and stripped of their humanity. And so, the idea of race was born. In the late 17th century, European thinkers started categorizing humans into racial groups. One of the first was François Bernier, a French physician, who in 1684 divided humanity into 4 races based on physical traits. But it was Carl Linnaeus, the father of taxonomy, who in 1735 classified humans just like animals, splitting them into 4 races: Homo europaeus, Europeans whom he described as smart, inventive, and ruled by laws; Homo asiaticus, Asians whom he saw as rigid and ruled by customs; Homo americanus, indigenous Americans whom he called stubborn and ruled by traditions; Homo afer, Africans, whom he labeled lazy, careless, and ruled by caprice. Linnaeus wasn't just categorizing people, he was ranking them. His system placed white Europeans at the top and darker-skinned peoples at the bottom. But the most influential racial classification came from Johann Friedrich Blumenbach in 1779. He divided humans into 5 races: Caucasian, Mongolian, Malayan, Ethiopian, and American. He claimed that the Caucasian race, named after the Caucasus region, was the original human form from which all others had degenerated. This was not science. It was a story, one designed to justify European superiority. It gave an intellectual cover to slavery, colonialism, and genocide. By the 19th century, these racial theories hardened into scientific racism, a belief that race determined intelligence, morality, and destiny. Samuel Morton, an American doctor in the 1830s, collected skulls from different racial groups and measured them, claiming that white skulls were larger and therefore superior. His work was used to justify slavery in the United States, fueling the belief that Africans were naturally suited for servitude. The British Empire used social Darwinism, a twisted version of Darwin's evolution theory, to argue that Europeans had evolved to be more advanced than other races. Eugenics followed, a movement that sought to improve humanity by controlling who could reproduce. The same racial hierarchy that justified slavery was now being used to justify forced sterilizations, segregation, and even the Holocaust. But the truth? Modern genetics has completely destroyed the idea of race as a biological fact. The Human Genome Project proved that all humans are 99.9% identical at the genetic level. The differences between so-called races are tiny. There is more genetic variation within racial groups than between them. The concept of race is not based in biology, but in history, economics, and power. Yet, even though race is a lie, it has shaped real-world systems, laws, institutions, and identities built on false divisions. The world still operates on racial hierarchies that were invented centuries ago. So, the question isn't just who decided what race you are, it's why. And the answer is clear: to divide, to control, and to justify power. But understanding this history is the first step in breaking free from it. Because race was created, it can also be unmade. But can it truly be unmade? That's the real question. Race, though invented, has embedded itself into the structures of society so deeply that it dictates wealth, opportunity, and even life expectancy. It determines who is seen as a citizen and who is treated as an outsider. It shapes policies, borders, and even the way people see themselves. Even though science has disproven race as a biological fact, the world still operates as if it is real. Centuries of racial classification turned into systems. Slavery, apartheid, segregation, colonial rule, and these systems did not disappear overnight. They evolved. The same ideas that were used to justify oppression in the past now exist in subtler forms. In economic inequality, in racial profiling, in immigration laws, in who gets access to education, healthcare, and justice. Race was never about skin color alone. It was about power. And those who created the racial hierarchy never intended to erase it. They built legal structures to preserve it. The U.S. Constitution, for example, originally defined black people as 3/5 of a person. Jim Crow laws in the American South enforced racial segregation long after slavery ended. South Africa's apartheid system, modeled after American segregation, legally divided people into racial categories and determined where they could live, work, and go to school. Even today, racial categories exist on legal documents, passports, birth certificates, census records, forcing people into labels they never chose. But perhaps the greatest trick of race is that it convinced people to believe in it, to not just accept it, but to identify with it, to see themselves as black or white, Asian or Latino, as if these categories have always existed, as if they are natural and permanent rather than created and imposed. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because even though race was constructed, it cannot be simply ignored. Saying race is not real does not erase centuries of oppression, nor does it undo the privileges or disadvantages that come with racial identity. For those at the top of the hierarchy, race has been a shield. For those at the bottom, it has been a cage. So what now? If race is an invention, can it be dismantled? Some believe that the solution is to move beyond race entirely, to erase racial categories from law, education, and society. Others argue that we cannot ignore race until the damage it has done is repaired, that acknowledging history is necessary to correct injustice. But one thing is certain: understanding where race came from is the first step toward breaking its power. The lines drawn centuries ago were meant to divide us, but they do not have to define us. The past may have written the rules, but the future is still unwritten. And the biggest question left is, what will we do with this knowledge?